Meet Valentina Tereshkova, the Soviet cosmonaut who made history as the first woman to travel in space, spending over 70 hours orbiting the Earth. Fast forward to NASA's Sunita Williams, who braved a nail-biting moment aboard the Boeing Star liner before reaching the ISS last summer, only to end up staying in orbit for 9 months. Then there's Blue Origin's NS-31 crew, celebrated as the first all-female flight team since Tereshkova's iconic mission in 1963, inspiring young women worldwide. But here's where things get a little puzzling. During their time at the Kármán line, the NS-31 crew only filmed videos, sang, and expressed joy. Their experience aboard New Shepard seemed almost too smooth. Even their hair barely stood up, unlike what we've seen with astronauts like Williams. So why is Blue Origin calling them astronauts? That's a question that's ruffling feathers among aerospace experts. And they're not staying silent. Let's dive deep into the controversy in today's Tech Map episode. In the summer of 2021, when Jeff Bezos announced he was heading to space on New Shepard's first passenger flight, a petition quickly surfaced asking that he not return to Earth. In less than a month, it racked up over 165,000 signatures. Of course, that didn't stop him. He returned safely and then went on to develop what's now known as his space tourism program. Yes, on a rocket that looks like, if you know, you know.
2, 1. We have liftoff. New Shepard cleared the tower.
And New Shepard has cleared the tower on our way to space with our first human crew. Go, Jeff. Go, Mark. Go, Wally. Go, Oliver. You are going to space.
Colonel, you better take a look at this radar.
What is it, son?
I don't know, sir, but it looks like a giant...
Dick!
Yeah.
Take a look out of starboard.
Oh my God, it looks like a huge...
Pecker!
Oh, yeah.
Fast forward 4 years, and his company, Blue Origin, has pulled off 11 human space flights, sending a total of 58 people into space. By most standards, the program's been a success. But what really got people talking wasn't the science or the milestones. It was the 11th flight, NS-31, which felt more like a publicity stunt than a step forward for space exploration. This suborbital trip featured an all-women crew, including pop star Katy Perry and Jeff Bezos' fiancée, Lauren Sanchez. And Blue Origin didn't hold back, promoting the mission as a major leap for space travel, with the exaggerated words such as, the first all-female flight crew since Valentina Tereshkova's solo spaceflight in 1963, creating lasting impact that will inspire people across our planet for generations, or uplifting so many on their historic journey toward the stars and back. Also, they call those 6 females the astronauts.
All 6 astronauts are going to start to feel the weightlessness, and shortly thereafter, we're going to let them unbuckle.
Even some female passengers on NS-31 did not hesitate to confirm it, emphasizing feminism when some called the flight a ride.
You are officially an astronaut.
Thank you so much.
How do you feel?
I feel super connected to love.
Number 3, please don't call it a ride. That is not a friggin' ride. Whenever a man goes up, you have never said to an astronaut, boy, what a ride. You know, we duplicated the same trajectory that Alan Shepard did back in the day, pretty much. No one called that a ride.
More ridiculously, after the 11-minute space mission, Katy Perry did something pretty bizarre. She emotionally kissed the ground. You'd think she'd been stranded in orbit for months like NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, not just floating in microgravity for 4 minutes. Even her hair didn't stand up like Sunita's did in space. Instead, it was displayed in a graceful manner. It kind of makes me wonder, did real NASA astronauts like Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams kiss the ground too after being stuck in space for 9 months? These PR stunts have caused backlash from the public and experts. Some comments popped off online. It's actually embarrassing that the media thinks the general public is stupid enough to deem these women as astronauts. If going to space for 3 minutes makes you an astronaut, then I'm a gynecologist. Meanwhile, Amazon workers are driving around in no AC vans pissing in water bottles. Actually, there are a lot. Secretary Sean Duffy posted a pretty long tweet talking about this matter. He argues that the NS-31 crew does not qualify as astronauts under FAA guidelines, which require crew members to perform activities essential to public safety or human spaceflight safety during the mission. The crew who flew to space this week on an automated flight by Blue Origin were brave and glam, but you cannot identify as an astronaut. They do not meet the FAA astronaut criteria, he wrote. To be honest, among those 6 passengers, only 2 are actual scientists, including Amanda Nguyen, who worked on the last NASA shuttle mission, STS-135, and the Kepler exoplanet mission, and a former NASA rocket scientist, namely Aisha Bohl. The other 4 were celebrities, with no relevant space qualifications. Blue Origin honors Lauren Sanchez for bringing the mission together and leading a team of explorers, but in fact, she has only experience in journalism and is a licensed helicopter pilot. There are well-defined standards that determine who qualifies as a real astronaut and what counts as actual spaceflight. For someone to be recognized as a true astronaut under the FAA guidelines, as Sean Duffy said, their presence on the mission must actively contribute to public safety or the overall safety of manned spaceflight. In other words, they can't just be along for the ride. The NS-31 crew on these so-called space flights didn't actually do anything meaningful. The only thing they do is record the videos and scream for joy. No. The real astronauts don't scream for joy due to being in space. The girls on the roller coaster do. They weren't part of a mission, and they didn't fly a real rocket in the traditional sense. Instead, they were just glamorized guests in a vehicle remotely piloted from the ground. Or in the literal words. Gayle King said calling her trip a ride was an insult to feminism. But in reality, she flew on a rocket built by a man and was remotely controlled by that man. It's so strange, huh? In general, she and her sisters are completely passive, in contrast to the image of active astronauts. So, what actually sets real space missions apart? They use real rockets with human involvement, not ones controlled remotely from the ground. It's not just a quick thrill ride. Real astronauts often spend days, weeks, or months in space, conducting crucial scientific research and taking on high-risk exploration tasks. They don't just skim the edge of space. Real missions go beyond the Kármán line by entering orbit. New Shepard, by comparison, only brushed the edge before dropping back down, barely higher than a typical commercial jet. It didn't achieve orbital flight. Achieving orbit, like what SpaceX's Dragon capsule does, demands much greater velocity than simply reaching the Kármán line. Orbiting means moving sideways around Earth at incredible speeds, something New Shepard never came close to. And then there's the so-called zero-gravity experience. Girls, I'm sorry to say this. The brief weightlessness you all felt was just free fall, similar to what you feel on a roller coaster or seesaw. The capsule goes way up and then it just falls. When it comes to re-entry, real spacecraft return scorched and sometimes beat up, burn marks, chipped tiles, even missing parts. But the capsule from this flight, according to critics, it came back clean as a whistle. That's not how real spacecraft look after re-entry. And perhaps the most eyebrow-raising detail, the capsule doors apparently opened with a doorknob, like your front door. That small detail left many wondering. Was this truly a spacecraft, or just a really expensive, really high-altitude amusement ride? If you want to see what a real space company looks like, take a look at SpaceX. In 2022 alone, SpaceX launched 61 rockets. That's more than one launch per week. In 2023, they broke that record with 96 launches in a single year. By the end of 2024, SpaceX had completed over 105 successful launches, leading global launch stats and leaving every other private and government space agency in the dust. Now compare that to Blue Origin. Over the same 3-year period, they launched just one rocket per year, and every single one was a suborbital New Shepard flight. No orbital missions, no satellite deployments, no crewed flights to the ISS. Just a few short, 11-minute hops above the Kármán line carrying wealthy passengers for a few minutes of free fall. That's not even close. While Blue Origin is busy putting on PR-heavy suborbital joyrides, SpaceX is building real space infrastructure. And on top of that, they're developing Starship, the most powerful rocket ever made. Starship isn't just another launch vehicle. It's a 2-stage, fully reusable system that can carry up to 150 metric tons of cargo to low Earth orbit, more than double the payload capacity of NASA's Saturn V, the rocket that sent astronauts to the Moon. Standing 120 meters tall, Starship is the tallest rocket ever built. It produces over 7,600 metric tons of thrust at liftoff, powered by 33 Raptor engines on the Super Heavy booster. That's more thrust than any rocket in history, including NASA's Space Launch System and even the legendary Saturn V. SpaceX has already launched 8 Starship test flights. In Flight 5, a record was made as the firm successfully caught a Super Heavy booster for the first time, a huge leap forward in the goal of full reusability. On Flight 7, SpaceX introduced the rocket's Block 2 hardware, a more advanced and powerful version. Nevertheless, the flight ended in a bang as usual when you release any major update. Flight 8 followed the same path, but again provided more valuable data for the company. And while not every flight has been perfect, each one has pushed development forward, testing everything from heat shields to stage separation, and even controlled descents. Their latest launches show major progress in reusability and high-altitude control. Meanwhile, Blue Origin's so-called orbital rocket, New Glenn, has been in development for years, with delay after delay. It was promised in 2016, but it did not take off for the first time until 2025. Let's be real, there's no comparison here. SpaceX is doing the real work, designing, building, testing, launching, and repeating at a pace no one else can touch. Blue Origin, on the other hand, is turning space into a luxury tourism business. This is Launch Site 1 in West Texas on July 20th, 2021. For the first time, Blue Origin's suborbital New Shepard capsule carried passengers to space, including Jeff Bezos, his brother Mark Bezos, Wally Funk, and Oliver Damon. The success of the NS-16 mission marked a major milestone for the Washington-based company, as since then, they have started a new kind of space travel: space tourism. To date, 58 people have flown on New Shepard to cross the Kármán line, the internationally recognized boundary of space. Notably, among those 58 passengers, the majority were wealthy individuals, including entrepreneurs, investors, and space industry executives, as well as celebrities and high-profile public figures. It has a point, since the ticket price for each New Shepard mission could be up to tens of millions of dollars, which most people can't afford. Flights on this vehicle last just 11 minutes from launch to landing, with 4 minutes of weightlessness. Of course, with a few minutes in space, you can hardly do any important scientific tasks, so it's all just for fun. That explains why New Shepard flights look more like a luxury indulgence for the elite than traditional space missions. However, some passengers don't agree with that.
Please don't call it a ride. That is not a friggin' ride. Whenever a man goes up, you have never said to an astronaut, boy, what a ride. You know, we duplicated the same trajectory that Alan Shepard did back in the day, pretty much. No one called that a ride. It was called a flight. It was called a journey, because a ride implies that it's something frivolous or something that's lighthearted. There was nothing frivolous about what we did.
This is the share of the co-host of CBS Mornings, Gayle King, one of 6 female passengers on the latest controversial NS-31 mission. Blue Origin promotes NS-31 as historically significant, and to be fair, an all-female spaceflight is a milestone worth highlighting. This is the first all-female flight crew since Valentina Tereshkova's solo spaceflight in 1963. On their website, they also call their passengers astronaut crew, a definition reserved for trained individuals who contribute to the development of human space exploration. They give Jeff Bezos' fiancée, Lauren Sanchez, credit as to lead a team of explorers on a mission that will challenge their perspectives of Earth, empower them to share their own stories, and create lasting impact that will inspire generations to come. But when you see their spacesuits designed with more fashion statements than functional astronaut gear, it makes you wonder, is this a real astronaut mission? Or a fashion runway in orbit? You know, spacesuits are an essential part of spaceflight, and passengers on Blue Origin's new Shepard flights will wear custom flight suits in a distinctive blue color. Nevertheless, for the NS-31 mission, these suits were specially redesigned by the fashion brand Monse, led by designers Fernando Garcia and Laura Kim, in collaboration with crew member Lauren Sanchez. The NS-31 flight suits are described as sleeker than previous versions and are made of flame-resistant stretch neoprene. They are tailored for comfort and aesthetics, omitting features like shoulder pads for a more modern look. Its upper part resembles the sleek, futuristic, and form-fitting uniforms seen in the Star Trek science fiction series. Meanwhile, its lower part recalls Elvis Presley's famous stage costumes during his Las Vegas performances. In short, the suits highlight their fashion-forward, attention-grabbing appearance rather than traditional astronaut utility. Okay, I admit that SpaceX's spacesuit, such as Starman, has the sleek design too, but at least it makes you look more like an astronaut than the NS-31 Star Trek suit. At SpaceX, the focus is clear: safety, performance, and spacecraft integration. These sleek white suits are designed in-house in Hawthorne, California, tailored to each astronaut for a snug and comfortable fit. And they're not just for looks. They're built to protect astronauts during launch, re-entry, and in-capsule emergencies. When it comes to tech specs, SpaceX takes the lead. The NS-31 suits lack key life support features. There's no sign of systems supporting extravehicular activity, or even integration with spacecraft systems. They seem more like a bold statement than a functioning part of the mission. This makes sense. Ahead of the first crewed mission in 2021, Jeff Bezos shared that with the new Shepard's cabin pressurized, spacesuits would be redundant. SpaceX suits, on the other hand, are engineered for survival. Built with Kevlar and Nomex, they include fire-resistant materials, life support ports, and touchscreen-compatible gloves for interacting with the Crew Dragon capsule. Each suit connects via a single umbilical port on the thigh, making setup fast and seamless. Next, let's talk about comfort. Astronauts praise SpaceX suits for their tailored fit, lightweight, and ease of use, even in microgravity. They're easier to put on and take off than older NASA suits and feel less bulky during extended missions. While comfortable enough to look at, Blue Origin's NS-31 suit lacks essential functionality. Therefore, it is clear that the design of the SpaceX suit is much more advanced, because it not only meets complex technical requirements, but also meets the needs of the user. So in the end, while Blue Origin's NS-31 suits made a statement for fashion and inclusivity, SpaceX suits are designed for real missions, real risks, and real results. Which would you rather wear to space? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you learned something new, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into space tech. SpaceX first introduced its IVA suit, known as Starman, for the Dragon spacecraft during the Demo 2 mission in 2020. The experience gained from several years has enabled SpaceX to further advance its suit technology. Last May, the company made headlines in the space community by revealing its new EVA suit, designed for the first private spacewalk on Polaris Dawn. The SpaceX EVA suit closely resembles the IVA suit, which is intended for use inside spacecraft during launch and landing, but not for exposure to space. The EVA suit, however, features upgraded materials and improved joints to boost astronaut mobility and provide protection from the vacuum and extreme temperatures of space. Chris Trigg, manager of SpaceX's spacesuit team, explained that significant effort went into developing new thermal management layers for the suit and ensuring crew comfort inside. There was a lot of work on both the materials of the suit, developing a whole new layer that we needed to add for thermal management, as well as looking at the thermal condition for the crew members themselves and making sure that they were at a comfortable temperature inside the suit. The manager of SpaceX's spacesuit team, Chris Trigg, said, "Although the EVA suit is based on the IVA design, its soft sections become rigid under pressure, and it incorporates specialized joints for flexibility. This approach is intended to avoid the discomfort associated with traditional NASA suits, focusing not just on astronaut survival, but also on comfort." Elon Musk has noted the difficulty of maintaining mobility in a pressurized suit, likening it to being inside an inflated balloon, and emphasized the challenge of creating joints that allow movement.
Because if you just inflate the suit, you're just basically, you're kind of like one of those balloons at a party or something, So it's quite hard to still be mobile in an inflated suit, and have the joints move and stuff. And
the difference in suit design is largely due to their intended uses. NASA's EMU suits are built mainly for short spacewalks in low Earth orbit, such as those on the ISS. SpaceX, however, envisions missions of longer duration and greater physical demands, such as those on Mars, making comfort a higher priority. Maintaining proper suit pressure is also crucial for safety, as illustrated by the experience of Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, who struggled to re-enter his spacecraft after his suit inflated during a spacewalk. SpaceX's EVA suit also incorporates technology from other company projects, such as thermal materials originally developed for Falcon and Dragon vehicles, now used in the suit's boots. The helmet features a new heads-up display, providing real-time data on suit temperature, humidity, pressure, and a mission clock. According to Polaris Dawn mission commander Jared Isaacman, while the EVA suit looks similar to the IVA suit on the outside, its internal upgrades are significant. Isaacman said the EVA suits are the result of hundreds of hours of testing different materials over the years. Obviously, this is just the first generation of the suit, and it's not the best yet. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk also highlighted, "Our next-gen spacesuit will be even better." SpaceX's advanced brand-new suit catches the eyes of astronauts. Retired astronaut Chris Hadfield recalled his own experience walking in space and the suit he wore, models that would be considered outdated today. "The spacesuit that I wore for my first 2 spacewalks was old. I mean, it was designed in the 60s and built in the early 1980s, said Hadfield. "This one, they've used the latest manufacturing techniques right from the beginning, integrating everything together, trying to make it as simple for the crew as possible." The Canadian astronaut added that the new SpaceX EVA suits are easy to get on and off, and are made flexible, so movement is easier. Polaris's mission specialist, Anna Menon, highly valued the safety. "Thrilled to get to share SpaceX's new EVA spacesuit. This is the suit that will keep us safe on the first ever commercial spacewalk, and a big stepping stone towards a future where thousands of people are walking on the surface of Mars." Huge shout out to the incredible SpaceX team for this feat. Tim Peake, the last British astronaut to go into space, said on X that it would be very interesting to hear the crew's full feedback on the new EVA suit mobility, something he said was incredibly important yet hard to achieve, especially fingertip fidelity. He added, "Elbow mobility looks great though. This is the game changer. Modern spacesuits like the one from SpaceX have taken a huge leap beyond the bulky traditional suits of the past. If you ask astronauts about the old NASA suits, the words you'll often hear are heavy, bulky, and uncomfortably warm. But here's the thing. The discomfort isn't just from the weight. Once those suits are pressurized, they act almost like a balloon. They become stiff, resisting any bend or twist. Every move you make, you're fighting the suit itself as it tries to spring back to its original shape. Now imagine doing that for hours. It's exhausting. Blue Origin's recent NS-31 mission feels less like a leap for space exploration and more like a carefully orchestrated media play. The whole thing seemed designed to stir buzz, spark debate, and flood headlines. All classic signs of a PR stunt. It's a textbook example of how companies can use controversy and spectacle to grab attention and quietly push their branding or marketing goals in the background. NS-31 marked Blue Origin's 11th human flight, taking off on April 14, 2025, with 6 women on board. A mix of scientists, activists, and celebrities. The suborbital trip lasted just over 10 minutes and briefly carried them past the Kármán line, the widely accepted edge of space. Like earlier New Shepard flights, it was fully automated, kind of echoing the early days of spaceflight, like Alan Shepard's in 1961. However, some suspicious circumstances during this flight have fueled speculation that it was a fake. Much of this speculation stems from the fact that the vehicle appeared pristine and clean after re-entry, and the doors had been opened from the inside. On the other hand, reliable sources and experts have confirmed that, yes, it actually happened, and technically, it went off without a hitch. To add to the certainty, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, AIAA, spoke up and gave the mission a thumbs up, calling it an important step in commercial space travel. In my opinion, and I think many here would agree, this mission is real. There are several plausible explanations for all those doubts. A suborbital vehicle like New Shepard doesn't go fast enough to get scorched. And about the door matter, I think the girls intentionally violated the safety protocol. To be frank, passengers can open the hatch themselves from inside the Blue Origin New Shepard capsule after landing. The hatch has an internal handle that lets the crew open it if needed, kind of like an emergency exit. However, under normal circumstances, the ground crew usually opens the hatch from the outside once the capsule is safely on the ground. This helps keep things coordinated and safe during recovery. In the NS-31 flight, you might have noticed the hatch briefly opened from the inside right after landing. The crew opened it themselves, but then they closed it again so Jeff Bezos could come over and open it from the outside with a special tool. Clearly, this is the smooth cooperation between the crew and Jeff Bezos, mostly for the show, with a bit of theater for the cameras and media. Perhaps to create drama to make the story more viral.
You know what's going to come out of her mouth, but really her heart.
And is that Jeff Bezos out there right by the capsule? Kind of hard to see.
That is correct. That is Jeff Bezos, our founder.
Enter Jeff, strolling in like a space cowboy, prop tool in hand, ready for his big cinematic moment. The dramatic door opening scene? Well, the door was already open. To make things weirder, the tool he held barely touched the hatch and didn't seem to interact with any kind of locking mechanism. Then came the line, delivered with a theatrical chuckle that can be heard.
She didn't really close it again.
Everything was shown clearly in front of the camera for 100,000 views. So, do you think that it is just an unintentional moment? If Jeff wants everything to be perfect, perhaps he cuts off those imperfect moments. All of this was front and center on camera, broadcast to hundreds of thousands of viewers. So, was it just a casual, unscripted moment? Maybe. But if Jeff Bezos is as obsessed with perfection and branding as people say, you'd think a truly accidental or awkward moment like that would have hit the cutting room floor. Instead, it stayed. Which kind of makes you wonder if the space cowboy with the magic wrench act was all part of the show. Alright, let's talk about how Blue Origin turned their NS-31 mission into a full-blown media circus before the rocket even left the ground. So this marketing campaign didn't start on launch day. It kicked off the moment they dropped the crew list. And guess what? It wasn't just scientists. Nope. They sprinkled in some celebrity glitter, including none other than pop icon Katy Perry and Jeff Bezos' fiancée, Lauren Sanchez. Because nothing says cutting-edge spaceflight like a dash of pop royalty and billionaire romance, right? The minute Katy Perry's name got linked to the flight, headlines exploded. Katy Perry in space started trending like wildfire. Suddenly, this wasn't just a space mission. It was a cultural event. News outlets that usually don't touch space coverage with a 10-foot pole, BBC, NPR, People magazine, were all over it. Not to report on rocket specs or orbital trajectories, but to gush about the vibes and the emotional moments. Classic. From a branding perspective, it was genius. This is exactly what commercial space travel is becoming. A stage for storytelling, content, and brand moments. You slap a few famous faces on it, and boom, you've got viral content. It's less spaceflight and more spacefluencer campaign. But they didn't stop there. The mission was also branded as the first all-female flight crew since Valentina Tereshkova's solo spaceflight in 1963. That tagline was clearly designed to hit the sweet spot of social media engagement and political correctness. Cue the inspirational music. They really tried to push the empowering women in STEM angle. Gayle King, one of the passengers, even leaned into the feminism card, especially when people criticized the mission as just a glorified ride. And to drive the sentiment home, they included footage of Oprah Winfrey literally crying as her best friend Gayle went to space. I mean, how much more scripted can you get? But here's where it falls apart. The public wasn't exactly buying it. People were quick to call out the whole thing as more of a PR stunt than a meaningful space milestone. I mean, let's be real. These women weren't astronauts. They bought a ticket, strapped in, and went for a joyride on a fully automated vehicle. They didn't pilot anything. They didn't conduct experiments. They didn't even touch a control panel. So this idea of inspiring little girls, yeah. Inspiring them to do what exactly? Save up $500,000 for a ticket? Or maybe ride on the rich man's penis-shaped rocket to become an astronaut? Let's just call it what it is. A well-produced ad campaign for Blue Origin, dressed up as a historic spaceflight. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, while some people who've taken these suborbital rides are quick to call themselves astronauts, there are others who approach it with a little more humility, and Emily Calandrelli is a great example of that. Emily joined the NS-28 New Shepard mission on November 22, 2024. She's not just a space tourist. She's an actual engineer, a science communicator, and the host of shows like Emily's Wonder Lab. On that flight, she became the 100th woman ever to go to space. Pretty amazing, right? But instead of just showing up for the ride, she actually contributed to the mission. She brought along a small science experiment, flying plant seeds, to study how spaceflight affects them. She also wore a bio button to track her vitals during the mission. So there was a real educational and research element to her journey. And she didn't keep it to herself. She recorded the entire process, from pre-flight training to the moment the capsule landed, so her audience could get an honest, inside look at what the experience is really like. If you check out her video, there's this super down-to-earth moment where she says,
"This is our space capsule. Every passenger has their own window."
She doesn't say astronaut. She says passenger. And honestly, that kind of humility stood out. especially when you compare it to others who jumped at the chance to slap the astronaut title after an 11-minute ride. It's no surprise that Emily got way more respect and positive feedback online. People can tell when someone's being real about what the experience is, and when someone's just chasing a title. New Shepard is a fully reusable suborbital launch vehicle developed for space tourism by Blue Origin. The vehicle is named after Alan Shepard, who became the first American to travel into space and the fifth person to walk on the moon. The vehicle is capable of vertical takeoffs and landings. Additionally, it is also capable of carrying humans and customer payloads into a suborbital trajectory. New Shepard consists of a launch rocket and a crew capsule. The capsule can be configured to house up to 6 passengers, cargo, or a combination of both. The launch rocket is powered by one BE-3PM engine, which sends the capsule above the Kármán line, where passengers and cargo can experience a few minutes of weightlessness before the capsule returns to Earth. The launch vehicle is designed to be fully reusable, with the capsule returning to Earth via 3 parachutes and a solid rocket motor. The rocket lands vertically on a landing pad 3.2 kilometers north of the launch pad. The company has successfully launched and landed the New Shepard launch vehicle 29 times, with 1 partial failure deemed successful and 1 failure. The launch vehicle has a length of 19.2 meters, 63 feet, a diameter of 3.8 meters, 12 feet, and a launch mass of 75,000 kilograms, 165,000 pounds. The BE-3PM engine produces 490 kilonewtons, 110,000 pounds force of thrust at liftoff. The first development vehicle of the New Shepard development program was a subscale demonstration vehicle named Goddard that was built in 2006 following earlier engine development efforts by Blue Origin. Goddard was assembled at the Blue Origin facility in Kent, Washington, United States, and made its first flight on November 13, 2006. A second test flight was scheduled for December 2nd, but never took place. 2 further flights were performed by Goddard. Blue Engine 1, or BE-1, was the first rocket engine developed by Blue Origin and was used in the company's Goddard development vehicle. On the path to developing the New Shepard launch vehicle, a crew capsule was also needed, and design was begun on a space capsule in the early 2000s. One development milestone along the way became public. At first glance, Blue Origin's NS-31 mission looks like a powerful, inspirational moment. An all-female crew headed to space, crossing the Kármán line, about 62 miles above Earth. Big names like singer Katy Perry and TV host Gayle King were among the passengers. The flight stood out for one bold reason. It intentionally excluded men. That's a rare move in spaceflight history, and it challenged the traditionally male-dominated culture we've seen since the early days of space exploration. The crew wasn't just made up of celebrities in the entertainment and television industry. It included influential women from the space and scientific field, like Amanda Nguyen, the first Vietnamese and Southeast Asian woman to go to space, and Aisha Bowe, a former NASA rocket scientist, entrepreneur, and global STEM advocate. Naturally, this mission made a big splash in the media. One thing that really stood out was how emotionally open the crew was. They confidently referred to themselves as astronauts and were ready to defend that title, and that stirred up some controversy. Why? Astronauts are traditionally seen as people who take on high-risk, deeply technical, and mission-critical roles in space. So, for some critics, this emotional framing felt more like a PR move, a way to draw extra media attention to the flight. But on a deeper level, calling themselves astronauts might not be just a PR move. It could be an intentional push for a cultural shift, expanding the definition of what it means to be part of space exploration. It's a statement that space isn't just for engineers or scientists anymore. It's for storytellers, advocates, and creatives too. Of course, that raised questions in the space community about what really counts as an astronaut. Now here's where things get really interesting. As criticism started to roll in, from both the public and within the space community, Katy Perry and Gayle King stepped up to defend the mission. But one big player stayed silent: Blue Origin. And honestly, that silence isn't surprising. Why did Blue Origin stay quiet? First, it's a smart strategic communication move. By not jumping into the controversy, Blue Origin avoided adding fuel to the fire. Letting the passengers speak for themselves made the mission feel more human, more personal, and it shifted the spotlight away from the company's motives. Second, it was clearly a case of delegating the message. The passengers, especially celebrities like Katy Perry and Gayle King, are media pros. Their defense of the mission carried more emotional weight than any corporate statement ever could. That's likely one big reason Blue Origin chose figures from cultural and entertainment fields. They know how to shape public conversation. Third, there's a political layer. When people found out that Jeff Bezos had donated $1 million to Donald Trump's inauguration fund, it added fuel to the fire. Critics started to question whether the mission was genuinely about empowering women, or just a PR stunt tied to powerful elites. Some even said, are these women flying because of merit, or because of their proximity to power and wealth? With that kind of talk floating around, staying silent helped Blue Origin avoid getting dragged into political debates and protect its public image. And look, this silent approach, it's not new. In the world of celebrity marketing, this is textbook. When scandals hit, public figures often stay quiet and let the noise fade. Engaging too much can keep the controversy alive. In the same way, Blue Origin might have calculated that silence was the best way to let the drama pass, while letting the mission's story speak for itself. In the meantime, BO is busy preparing for the second flight of its big New Glenn rocket, which is currently thought to be around the middle of this year. Recently, at their TCAT facility in Exploration Park, Florida, the media captured images of one of BO's tanks, damaged during testing. It looks like the firm is using a GS-1 test article for the New Glenn rocket, probably pushing it to its limits to see how much it can handle before failing. This kind of test to failure helps them understand the rocket's structural boundaries and improve safety going forward. On Thursday, April 24th, the second stage of their New Glenn rocket, known as Glenn Stage 2, or GS-2, completed a critical hot fire test. It was a 15-second test firing of their BE-3U engines, and it went off successfully. Even better, they managed to boost the thrust from 173,000 pounds force up to 175,000. That extra power might seem small, but it's a big deal for future missions, especially for the upcoming New Glenn 2. But here's the question everyone's asking. When is the second flight actually happening? Are we going to see another delay? Just like what happened with New Glenn's first launch. Well, according to NASA's Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, ASAP for short, there's a growing confidence that New Glenn could finally launch around June. But read between the lines a little, and it sounds like NASA is also politely reminding Blue Origin not to mess this up again. Because let's be real, if Blue Origin delays New Glenn again, the fallout would be way worse than the drama around the New Shepard NS-31 mission. First off, Blue Origin's reputation is on the line. This isn't another suborbital tourist ride like New Shepard. New Glenn is their first heavy-lift orbital-class rocket. It's supposed to compete directly with SpaceX in the satellite launch business, especially for major projects like Amazon's Project Kuiper, their answer to Starlink. So any delay here doesn't just cost time, it threatens their credibility in an industry dominated by SpaceX. And keep in mind, Blue Origin is already way behind its competitors. They know it. They're under serious pressure to deliver. Second, technical issues are still lurking. The delay in the maiden launch came from complex subsystem problems, and the trouble came from booster landing challenges. If problems keep popping up, that's more money spent on troubleshooting and testing, and more time lost getting New Glenn into regular service. Third, and maybe the most important, NASA's timeline could take another major hit. NASA's already had to delay its Escapade mission to Mars because New Glenn wasn't ready. It was supposed to launch in October 2024, but now we're looking at no earlier than spring 2025, possibly riding on New Glenn 2. And if they miss that spring window, they'll have to wait until the next Mars launch opportunity in December 2026, pushing arrival even further past 2027. That's years of scientific research delayed just because a rocket wasn't ready on time. Now here's another twist. Blue Origin still hasn't announced what payload will fly on New Glenn's second launch. And Dave Limp, Blue Origin's CEO, even said, "If it came to it and we just had to fly a mass simulator, we'll fly a mass simulator." Translation: if the rocket isn't ready to carry commercial customers' payloads, they'll launch a dummy payload just to get the flight done. But if that happens, NASA might need to scramble, adjusting mission schedules, finding backup rockets, and probably spending more money. It could even impact NASA's broader exploration goals by squeezing their already tight budget. There's one more thing. New Glenn is a key piece of the Orbital Reef project, a future commercial space station that Blue Origin and Sierra Space are building under NASA's Commercial LEO Destinations program. If New Glenn keeps getting delayed, it's not just about satellites or Mars probes. It could slow down the whole plan to replace the aging ISS. And there's even more riding on New Glenn. Other payloads expected to fly include missions for AST Space Mobile's huge Bluebird smartphone satellites and test flights for the Blue Moon Mk2, the human lunar lander they're developing for NASA's Artemis program. NASA has awarded Blue Origin a launch services contract for its New Glenn rocket under the NASA Launch Services 2 program, which is a multiple award, indefinite delivery/indefinite quantity contract running through December 2027. This contract allows NASA's Launch Services program to use New Glenn for future missions, with the contract value around $20 million for the launch. Blue Origin's New Glenn is also part of the U.S. Department of Defense's National Security Space Launch Phase 3 program. Blue Origin has been awarded contracts for both Lane 1 and Lane 2 missions under this program, which covers national security launches. Specifically, Blue Origin is projected to be awarded 7 Phase 3 Lane 2 missions starting in fiscal year 2026, with a contract value of approximately $2.4 billion for launches between 2025 and 2029. These contracts require high reliability and mission assurance for sensitive payloads, including spy satellites and missile detection systems. Blue Origin's New Glenn launch services are funded initially by Jeff Bezos and the Department of the Air Force, with about $500 million from the U.S. Space Force's NSSL program. The company aims to offer a regular launch cadence of up to 8 launches per year, with a unique contract structure that holds to launch timelines even if some payload providers are not ready, flying remaining payloads on schedule at no extra cost. So it's not just about one rocket or one mission. New Glenn's success ties directly into Blue Origin's entire future. From NASA's scientific missions to the Department of Defense's critical national security payloads. New Glenn is a heavy-lift launch vehicle developed and operated by the American company Blue Origin. The rocket is designed to have a partially reusable, 2-stage design with a diameter of 7 meters, 23 feet. The first stage is powered by 7 BE-4 engines, while the second stage relies on 2 BE-3U engines, all designed and built in-house by Blue Origin. It launches from Cape Canaveral Launch Complex 36, with future missions planned from Vandenberg Space Launch Complex 9. Development of New Glenn began prior to 2013 and was officially announced in 2016. The rocket is named in honor of NASA astronaut John Glenn, the first American to orbit Earth. The inaugural vehicle was unveiled on the launch pad in February 2024. Its maiden flight took place on January 16, 2025, carrying a prototype Blue Ring spacecraft, marking the first launch from LC-36 since NROL-23 in 2005. This mission served as the first of several demonstration launches required to be certified for use by the National Security Space Launch Program. In the year 2000, Jeff Bezos was at a crossroads. Having just been named Times Person of the Year for transforming the world of e-commerce with Amazon, he found himself gazing at the night sky, captivated by a vision far beyond online retail. Unlike many who saw space as a distant dream or government domain, Bezos saw a future where humanity could thrive beyond Earth, millions living and working in space, preserving our blue planet by moving heavy industry off it. So, quietly and without much fanfare, he started Blue Origin in 2000. He funded it himself and focused on building rockets that could be reused, making space travel more affordable and reliable. Bezos took a careful, step-by-step approach, working on technology like the new Shepard rocket that could go to space and come back safely. This early start 2 years before Elon Musk founded SpaceX in 2002 gave Blue Origin a head start in exploring reusable rocket technology and suborbital flight. Despite the early hype, Amazon's founder couldn't capitalize on his head start. While Elon Musk's SpaceX successfully completed its first orbital mission with the Falcon, one rocket back in September 2008, Blue Origin was still confined to suborbital flights with New Shepard. This harsh reality stung for Blue Origin, especially since SpaceX's early win became the launchpad for much greater achievements. In May 2020, SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft became the first private spacecraft to reach the International Space Station, opening the door to a lucrative long-term partnership with NASA. Since then, SpaceX and Blue Origin have gone down very different paths. SpaceX has established itself as a leader in delivering payloads for meaningful scientific missions, while Blue Origin's reputation has become more aligned with luxury space tourism for the wealthy. To be fair, Blue Origin hasn't given up on its original goal of reaching orbit. They've been working on their first orbital rocket, New Glenn. However, years of delays have been a major setback. Although development started before 2013 and was officially announced in 2016, New Glenn didn't launch until January 2025. In the maiden launch, the vehicle reached orbit, but its booster failed to be recovered, leading to the company's second attempt. Meanwhile, SpaceX sprinted ahead. The Falcon 9 family has completed nearly 500 launches to date. Along the way, SpaceX set remarkable records, flying a single booster on 27 missions, achieving the highest Earth orbit ever reached by humans, conducting the first commercial spacewalk through the Polaris Dawn mission, and sending the Fram-2 crew into a polar orbit, the first human flight to do so. SpaceX's reputation soared even higher when its Crew Dragon successfully rescued 2 stranded NASA astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, after they were stuck in space for 9 months. Blue Origin isn't irrelevant, though. They've conducted 31 New Shepard suborbital flights, 11 of which carried human passengers and a few of which for NASA's scientific experiments. Nevertheless, that's nothing compared to what SpaceX has achieved. Blue Origin's NS-31 mission in mid-April was heavily promoted as featuring the first all-female crew since Valentina Tereshkova's solo flight in 1963. However, this marketing effort backfired, drawing heavy criticism for distorting the traditional definition of space exploration. Adding fuel to the fire, some of the passengers declared themselves real astronauts and were even honored by the FAA, despite having only been space tourists. While Blue Origin certainly captured public attention, it also further damaged its already fragile reputation. Blue Origin's annual revenue is quite underwhelming, sitting below $300 million and primarily stemming from a few suborbital tourist flights and a small number of contracts. And that's being generous. Focusing on suborbital missions isn't a great strategy either, since it's a niche market with limited growth potential compared to orbital launches and satellite services. Plus, they're facing competition from Virgin Galactic. The company has yet to lock down a reliable stream of commercial or government contracts to offset its hefty operational and R&D costs. Coupled with fewer launches and slower technology development, this leaves Blue Origin financially unsustainable. To put things into perspective, Blue Origin's $300 million yearly revenue is a mere fraction of SpaceX's staggering $13.1 billion revenue in 2024. Huge difference, right? According to Payload, SpaceX's $13.1 billion in 2024 is a jump from $8.7 billion in 2023, fueled by various business lines. Launch revenue grew to $4.2 billion in 2024, up from $3.5 billion in 2023. Starlink revenue grew to $8.2 billion in 2024, up from $4.2 billion in 2023. Starlink customers grew to 4.6 million, up from 2.3 million. Other revenue was $720 million last year. So what caused Blue Origin to fail so miserably? Or rather, who created this mess? A major reason might be Jeff Bezos himself. While he's a brilliant entrepreneur, he's probably not the best engineer. This became apparent during a 2004 dinner meeting between Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, which is believed to have ignited their later space rivalry. Musk described the meeting as tense and claimed he tried to give Bezos valuable advice that was mostly ignored, later saying Bezos was barking up the wrong tree when it came to rockets. There's a clear difference between SpaceX and Blue Origin when it comes to finances and operational strategy. Blue Origin is often viewed as Jeff's passion project, heavily bankrolled without tight financial scrutiny. Bezos reportedly sells $1 billion or more of Amazon stock every year to fund Blue Origin. In 2021, Forbes estimated he invested over $7.5 billion of his personal wealth. This financial freedom means employees don't feel pressured to turn a profit quickly, allowing them to move methodically, or more bluntly, slowly. That's part of why the R&D for New Glenn dragged on for so long. Having deep pockets means Blue Origin doesn't face the same urgent financial challenges as SpaceX. Elon Musk realized early that easy money kills motivation. So he pushed SpaceX to operate at its limits, building a culture that tests employees' adversity quotient, their ability to thrive under pressure. In the early days, SpaceX had to fight for survival. Gwynne Shotwell, one of SpaceX's pioneers, still recalls the tough times in 2007 trying to sell a rocket that kept failing. Her mission was absolutely vital at that time because SpaceX would soon go bankrupt. Then, a Christmas miracle happened. NASA came through with a $1.6 billion contract 2 days before Christmas that saved the young startup company. These hardships forged a fearless, resilient team, ready to take on even greater challenges later on, like the long and volatile development of the Starship rocket. Musk's embrace of failure is also reflected in his transparency. From the beginning, SpaceX has been open about its setbacks, even broadcasting crashes and glitches. This level of transparency isn't easy, especially for someone constantly in the public eye like Musk. It invites intense media scrutiny and regulatory headaches, particularly because SpaceX is a military contractor and NASA's largest contractor. But in many ways, openness has been SpaceX's secret weapon. By being honest about failures and progress, SpaceX builds public trust, excites investors, and humanizes its ambitious goals like Mars colonization. Transparency keeps the public and stakeholders emotionally invested, making it easier to attract top talent and commercial customers. Owning up to setbacks shows that SpaceX is serious about innovation and problem solving. Blue Origin, by contrast, operates behind a curtain. They keep technical details, progress, and failures mostly hidden, aiming to protect their intellectual property and manage public perception. Bezos's approach is cautious and slow, avoiding hype and external pressure. However, this secrecy has its downsides. It breeds skepticism, weakens public excitement, and results in far less media attention compared to SpaceX. Without clear milestones and open communication, Blue Origin often seems stagnant and less innovative. Limited transparency also means fewer opportunities to build community trust and share knowledge across the aerospace industry. Years of slow progress and mounting criticism that Blue Origin was falling behind SpaceX finally took their toll on Jeff Bezos. That's when a massive shift began. Bezos initiated a strategic overhaul aimed at scaling up manufacturing, increasing launch frequency, and boosting operational efficiency. It all started at the top. In 2023, Bezos appointed Dave Limp, a former Amazon executive, as the new CEO of Blue Origin. Limp's mission was clear: bring Amazon's results-driven, high-pressure culture into Blue Origin to speed things up and cut through bureaucracy. His mandate focused on cranking up manufacturing output and launch cadence with more speed, decisiveness, and efficiency, addressing the bloated bureaucracy and lack of focus that had crept in with rapid expansion and hiring. Under Limp's leadership, Blue Origin underwent major organizational restructuring. In early 2025, the company laid off about 10% of its workforce, around 1,400 employees, flattened management layers, and trimmed engineering and R&D roles to better align with the company's priorities. This cultural shift ushered in a more Amazon-like, high-intensity work environment. Following Limp's new strategy, Blue Origin transitioned from heavy R&D to full-on operational mode, ramping up production and launch rates for the heavy-lift New Glenn rocket. Finally, the hard work started to pay off. After years of delays, New Glenn launched successfully and reached orbit in January 2025. This rocket plays a central role in Blue Origin's future ambitions, including supporting Project Kuiper, Bezos' satellite broadband project aimed at challenging SpaceX's Starlink. In addition to producing engines for its own rockets, Blue Origin supplies engines for other vehicles, including United Launch Alliance's Vulcan Centaur. It is also working on the Blue Moon human lunar lander for NASA's Artemis program, the Blue Ring spacecraft platform, and the Orbital Reef Space Station in partnership with other organizations.